I never thought a single meeting could change my life. I walked into the boardroom thinking it would be like every other day. Charts, numbers, nodding executives, deadlines. But then my grandfather's lawyer spoke, and everything froze. To inherit the billion-dollar trust, Adrian Vale must fall in love within 24 hours, he said. The room erupted with laughter. I stared at him, disbelief rooting me to the spot. Love? A test? At my age, with my life? Ridiculous. The clock in my mind started ticking before it even began on the wall. I felt my chest tighten. Every rational thought screamed this was absurd. Yet I knew the stakes. $1 billion, my company, my legacy. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my pulse. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in the silent room. Everyone assumed I would fail. Maybe they were right. I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my throat. This was the kind of test no one could prepare for. I left the room and felt the weight of every eye follow me. The walls of the office seemed to close in. I had always controlled every situation. Now I was powerless against a clause in a document. How do you fake something as human as love? I ran my hands over my face. For the first time, the money I thought could solve anything seemed meaningless. I glanced at my phone. 24 hours. The countdown had begun, even if I didn't yet understand how. I called my assistant. Book every elite party in the city tonight, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. I needed options, strategy, a plan. I couldn't fail. Not now. Not for this. She paused. Yes, sir, she said. Her tone carried doubt, and I hated that I noticed. Every step I took that evening felt like a march toward an invisible trap. I told myself charm could be engineered, like every other business deal. The first party was a blur. Glasses clinked, music thumped, laughter echoed. I moved from group to group, introductions rehearsed. I smiled, I complimented, I laughed where appropriate. Inside, I felt hollow. Everyone was performing, just like I expected. I studied them. Every glance measured, every word calculated. The luxury and glam couldn't hide the emptiness. And I realized something. I couldn't buy authenticity. A model approached, hair shining under the chandelier lights. Adrian Vale, the billionaire playboy, she purred. Her words hit me like a punch. Not because of the flattery, but because I saw through it. She wanted something from me, not me. I felt a spark of anger. Was I really reduced to a wallet with legs? I excused myself politely. The night had begun, but the challenge already felt impossible. I stepped onto the balcony for air. The city stretched below me like a web of lights and ambition. I felt completely alone. The magnitude of the challenge sank deeper. 24 hours to change a lifetime of emotional walls. I laughed quietly, a sound more bitter than amused. How do you teach a man who believes in nothing but logic to feel? And more importantly, how do you do it in a day? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through familiar contacts. Socialites, models, influencers. Everyone had a price. Everyone had an angle. I realized I didn't even know if I could recognize real affection. It was like stepping onto a foreign planet. Every conversation was a simulation, and the clock was ticking. Ticking louder with each shallow smile. I stepped back inside. The party noise felt distant, almost fake now. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't. Not if I wanted the inheritance. Not if I wanted to prove myself. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, I have 24 hours. Everything else is secondary. This is the beginning. And maybe, just maybe, the first crack in my carefully built armor has appeared. The next morning, sunlight cut through the glass walls of my penthouse. I hadn't slept. My mind replayed every interaction from the previous night. Luxury parties, rehearsed smiles, empty compliments. Nothing had moved me. I stared at my reflection in the window. Who am I if not my fortune? The question made my chest tighten, and I realized the clock was already halfway gone. I decided to try something different. No more parties. No more superficial charm. I needed authenticity. I left my penthouse, trading my tailored suit for something simpler. The streets welcomed me with raw energy. Life beyond my glass towers existed in unexpected corners. People moved with purpose, unbothered by wealth. It was alien and strangely intoxicating. I wandered into a quiet neighborhood, the city's chaos fading behind me. A small cafe caught my eye. A bell jingled as I stepped inside. The smell of coffee and baked bread filled the air. It felt normal, real. I didn't want to be noticed, just to blend in. And then I saw her. She was bent over a sketchbook, pencil moving quickly across the page. Concentration etched into her brow. A quiet intensity I hadn't seen in hours, maybe days. I approached, careful not to disturb her. And then, clumsy, typical me, I knocked my coffee onto her sketches. Her eyes snapped up, sharp and annoyed. I stammered, mortified. "I'm so sorry," I said, grabbing napkins. She waved me off, frustration clear. "No, seriously, that's ruined hours of work," she said, her voice a mix of anger and disbelief. I expected admiration, flattery, or at least awe. There was none. Instead, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Real reaction. She didn't care who I was, she just reacted, and it was refreshing. Her name was Maya Carter, freelance illustrator, struggling to pay rent, living paycheck to paycheck. I introduced myself with a practiced smile. She rolled her eyes. We talked. Not about money, not about power, not about status. Just life, daily struggles, dreams too fragile to share often. And something shifted. I wasn't a billionaire here. I was just Adrian. Hours passed unnoticed. We walked through the city together. She pointed out murals hidden in alleyways, small bookstores, quirky shops, food trucks with lines winding around corners. I hadn't been anywhere like this in years. She laughed at things that didn't require validation. She argued over the best coffee blend in the city. I was drawn into the rhythm of her life, and the clock, merciless, kept ticking. I felt something unfamiliar, a genuine connection. No pretense, no transactions, just laughter, arguments, small confessions. Her dreams felt important, fragile yet real. And I realized for the first time how hollow my life had been. The challenge wasn't about charm or strategy or money. It was about feeling something I had spent decades avoiding. Time slipped away. Evening crept over the city. I knew I had to confess. The truth, the challenge, the billion-dollar deadline. Her eyes widened in shock. Anger flashed. I had ruined the only genuine connection I'd felt in years. She left without another word. The cafe door swung shut behind her, and I felt the weight of failure crushing me. I walked back to the boardroom defeated. 24 hours had passed, and I had no inheritance, no love, just a painful reminder of my loneliness. I faced the board, admitting the truth. They nodded, almost satisfied. The money would go to charity. My empire felt fragile under my fingers. And yet, something inside me had changed. The boardroom felt colder than ever. I stared at the polished table, the weight of failure pressing down. Executives shifted in their seats, waiting for me to finish. I admitted defeat without flair. No excuses, no strategies, no charm. The inheritance was slipping away. I felt exposed, fragile, like the billionaire facade had shattered. I'd faced many battles in business, but this was personal, and the irony cut deep. Money couldn't fix what I lacked. I thought about Maya, her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she cared about things I never noticed. I felt a hollow ache in my chest. It wasn't just regret over money, it was regret over authenticity lost. The board's murmurs faded as I replayed our afternoon. Every mural, every sketch, every small argument felt monumental. I realized I had never been seen like that before, and that realization shook me more than any financial crisis ever could. I wanted to rewind time, to go back to that cafe, to tell her the truth in a way that didn't feel like a test. But time had betrayed me. The board had rules, lawyers had rules, and my grandfather's will had rules. I couldn't bend them. Or could I? A thought crept in. Maybe honesty was the only way left. Not strategy, not charm, not money, just honesty. I left the building, ignoring assistants and calls. The city felt different under my feet. Streets were quieter, colors brighter, sounds sharper. Every corner reminded me of Maya's world, her perspective, her rhythm, her life. I realized I had been living in a curated bubble for decades, a bubble I built to protect myself, and now it had trapped me. I retraced my steps to the cafe. My chest tightened with every block I passed. What would I say? Would she even listen? Would she believe me? I stopped outside the door. The bell jingled as I entered. The place was empty, except for a few late patrons and the faint aroma of coffee. She wasn't there. I waited. Minutes stretched into a fragile eternity. Then she appeared, sketchbook in hand, eyes wary. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. I cleared my throat. I need to be honest, I said. She raised an eyebrow, skeptical but listening. I swallowed. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was about showing her who I truly was. I told her everything. The clause, the 24 hours, the billion-dollar stakes. I expected anger, contempt, laughter. Instead, I saw silence. She processed each word carefully. Her eyes softened. Her hands gripped her sketchbook tighter. She finally spoke. So, all of it was a game? I shook my head. No, not a game. A test. And I failed. Until now. We walked again. Through the streets she loved. I followed her rhythm. Not as a billionaire, not as a competitor, not as a man racing a clock. Just as Adrian. She noticed the difference. Her laughter returned, softer this time. And I realized something extraordinary. Connection doesn't obey deadlines. It doesn't care about money. It just is. The city began to glow under evening lights. I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. Not hope for money, or status, or control. Hope for authenticity, for honesty, for something real. I turned to her, words catching in my throat. She looked at me, waiting. And in that moment, I didn't need the will to prove anything. The feeling was already there. I realized the last 2 hours weren't about strategy. They were about courage. Courage to show who I truly was. Courage to risk rejection for honesty. I didn't know if it was enough, but I knew I had to try. And sometimes trying honestly is braver than winning any fortune. Night settled over the city, the skyline glittering like scattered diamonds. I followed Maya down quiet streets, the hum of life distant but alive. Every step felt deliberate. Every word mattered. I had no tricks left, no rehearsed lines, just truth and the raw hope it could reach her. She glanced at me uncertain, searching for a hint of manipulation. I found none. I offered only myself. We paused by a small fountain, its water shimmering in the moonlight. I don't know if I can trust you, she said softly. Her voice trembled with sincerity, not anger. I nodded. I don't expect you to, but I need you to know, none of this was a game with you. Her eyes searched mine, fierce and wary. I felt exposed, vulnerable, alive. And in that moment, I understood the weight of honesty. Hours felt like minutes. We shared stories, small secrets, dreams too fragile to speak aloud. I laughed genuinely, without calculation. She smiled freely, the kind of smile that could light a room. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like Adrian Vale, the billionaire. I felt human, and maybe that was worth more than the $1 billion at stake. The weight of the inheritance loomed, but it no longer controlled me. I realized the $1 billion clause wasn't the test. The real challenge was me. Could I break my walls? Could I show someone my heart without fear? Could I risk everything for honesty? Every doubt I carried evaporated in her presence. The final hours were not about money. They were about truth. Maya stopped walking. I need time, she whispered, stepping back. I nodded, understanding. She turned and walked away, leaving me staring at the empty street. I felt panic clawing at me. The clock in my mind screamed the will's deadline. I had 24 hours and I had already risked everything, but I also knew that honesty couldn't be forced. I returned to the boardroom late at night. Executives waited, papers ready to sign. The charity transfer was set. My confession of failure hung heavy in the room. I had lost the inheritance, yet strangely, I felt lighter. The emptiness I had carried for decades loosened. For the first time, I understood the lesson my grandfather had hidden in his will. Then the door opened. Maya stepped in. The room went silent. Her eyes met mine. She had come back, not for money, not for status, but because she had seen something in me worth believing in. The board witnessed the moment, the will's condition quietly fulfilled. The will's condition was officially satisfied. I had the inheritance, but it didn't matter. Maya stood before me, not impressed by wealth, but by honesty. For the first time I felt seen, truly seen, and that recognition was worth more than any fortune. I smiled, a real smile, uncalculated and full. The lesson was clear. Connection cannot be bought or rushed. The city outside continued its quiet hum. I realized the greatest deal I ever made wasn't in dollars. It was in trust, in honesty, in love. Maya squeezed my hand, a silent affirmation of what mattered most. The clock had ended, the inheritance secured, but the real reward was far richer. And I knew I would never take it for granted again. If you want to see what happens next and continue this story, make sure to subscribe. Don't miss part 2, where the remaining hours and challenges unfold. Like, comment, and stay connected. This journey is just beginning.